Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Assad, and with me are a pair of my best friends when it comes to the automotive industry. I've got my good buddy, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners, and I want everyone to take note that Sami qualified that whole best friend appellation he just laid on me.
And I also have another good friend of mine. This is Chad Kirchner. Say hi to everyone else, Chad.
Hi, everyone else, Chad.
All three of us are automotive journalists. You can find our work on a number of sites. I mean, you can find most of my work on autoguide.com, but Ben, he writes for some other publications, including driving.ca and Haggerty. And Chad, I've seen your work at AutoGuide as well, but I've seen it recently on The Drive and some other sites. What am I missing here?
The Drive, pickuptrucks.com, AutoGuide, obviously. And I don't remember. So a lot of places. Anybody that's willing to write Chad a paycheck can get Chad's content.
There you go.
Sami, are you still contributing to combat handguns?
No, not anymore. Not after that last time.
That was a tense meeting.
It was tough. I mean, I had to answer a whole bunch of questions that I was not prepared to answer. Anyways, this week we have a whole bunch of new cars to talk to you about. Actually, some trucks. More trucks than cars. Isn't that right, guys?
I think so. I think the most interesting thing we're going to talk about today is what Chad did. I want to say last week. Was it last week, Chad?
It was, yeah.
And it was pretty amazing. Do you want to let us know? So I'm just going to cut to the chase. Chad went and had an adventure, the likes of which I've never experienced, and I'm super excited to hear about it.
I mean, I guess I can talk about it. No, I'm kidding. So last week, not this week of giving thanks, but I was in Morocco, actually, with Nissan's global LCV, which is their light commercial vehicle segment. So a lot of the listeners here will think, oh, well, Nissan, they make, Titans and Frontiers, and they're not necessarily a huge player, especially in the U.S. market. That's true. There's something like 2.4%, something around that, like somewhere between 2 and 3% of total truck sales. However, globally, the Nissan Renault Mitsubishi alliance is large, quite large. And part of the idea of this program was to bring in journalists from all over the world. So it wasn't just a group of Canadians and Americans, but it was also some Europeans, Middle Eastern journalists, as well as some Asian journalists. And they all came in, and over a couple of different days, we spent time in all of Nissan's body-on-frame vehicles. So that would be that wouldn't be Frontier because we didn't send one over there, but it was basically Navarra, which is the newer version of the Frontier, the Terra, which is the new Asian markets, I guess similar to a Pathfinder, but not quite a Pathfinder.
Is it smaller than a Pathfinder?
Wheelbase is, I believe, the same. I think the overhangs are a bit different.
Okay.
And then Patrol, and then Titan. So a little bit of everything.
Okay, so I want to start with what's familiar first. That would be like the Titan. I think we've all driven the Titan before. Has anything changed to it recently?
Due to logistical issues, as in it takes like 2 months to send a car over on a boat. We had 2018s there, but the Titan is changed for 2019. The biggest change, in addition to a couple of new colors, is the infotainment system. Has been updated to Nissan's latest head unit, so it supports Android Auto and CarPlay, and they also have a partnership with Fender Audio now.
Instead of Rockford Fosgate.
Yes, so instead of the Walmart brand Rockford Fosgate, it is now Fender. I got a chance to listen to it briefly at State Fair, Texas. I thought it sounded pretty good, but until you kind of have your own music and really what you're familiar with listening to, it's kind of hard to say for sure. But
I just want to back things up to when you said it takes 2 months to ship a truck across the ocean on a boat. I'd always pictured this event as being the kind of thing where you were loaded into the back of like a Hercules, and you were sitting in the truck and they opened the back door of the plane while you were over Morocco, and they just you parachuted out Fast and Furious style into the desert. Because I think what we're really glossing over here is you didn't just drive like in a Moroccan city, you were out in the dunes with these trucks, right? Like you were living the desert lifestyle.
We were living the desert lifestyle. So when you think Morocco, I mean, a lot of people will think of the cities, Casablanca for a lot of reasons, and Marrakesh are two sort of big cities. We were nowhere near there. We were actually within 30 kilometers of the Algerian border. So we were at basically the entrance to the Sahara. So while part of our drive route did take us through some villages and things like that, I mean, it was mostly out in the middle of absolute nowhere. And part of that absolute nowhere was the sands of the Sahara. So it was a really cool experience from that point. I mean, I've never been to Africa, so but unfortunately we did not, parachute out of planes or anything. It required just a simple CRJ 900 flight from Madrid to Arashidia, and that's it. But it took several months and a lot of customs dealing with in order to get the vehicles to the African continent. So especially Titan, because they not only did they bring Titan along, but they brought along spare parts, and they also brought the not the Titan base camp, that's the truck. They did a Armada concept off-roader overlander thing.
Yeah. Is that the one that was towing the telescope?
No, that's a little bit different. But
okay.
But yeah, so apparently when you declare a vehicle, you have to declare all the modifications on it as well. So there's apparently it's time consuming. So unfortunately we didn't have 19 Titans there. However, mechanically there's no difference between the 18 and the 19.
So cool. What was it like driving in the desert is what I assume Sami was about to ask.
Especially with something as big as the Titan, because the Titan can sometimes feel a little bit larger than the usual quarter-ton pickup.
So Titan's huge. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, look at that big truck, right? Like we had European journalists there that just like it's kind of like when it's unobtainium for them. So a big American V8 engine in a big honking truck it makes people giggle.
The Endurance V8 or the other one?
These were the 5.6 liter, the Endurance V8s.
Nice.
None of the XDs with the diesel came over. So but actually, I'm familiar of off-roading in sand with Titan.
Okay.
I've been to sand dunes up in northern Michigan in one.
Humble brag.
So, my point being is it kind of feels like a nice warm blanket when you're driving all of these vehicles that are completely new to you. Even though, yes, the Titan was the heaviest of the group, and yes, it requires a little bit different driving style in order to drive in the dunes. Like I felt comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. I knew that I wouldn't get stuck in that truck where, I was potentially nervous in some of the other ones. So it's just big though, and like even the roads. So in the villages and cities and stuff, roads are pretty narrow. There was one town that we drove through that apparently is where the King of Morocco was born. Mm-hmm. So that city had, in addition to a whole bunch of security checkpoints to get in and out, also was probably the most modern city that we went through. So roads were nice and wide and paved, and it felt very like money was spent there. A lot of the other cities and villages and stuff that we went to, I mean, none of them were cities. Towns probably a stretch in a lot of cases, but the roads are just narrow. But when you get out into the middle of nowhere, the roads are still narrow. They never widen them. So you may see a large kind of like a van hauling kind of a truck with just a bunch of bamboo and straw and hay or whatever on them that are just completely overloaded, and they take up the whole road. Even though here in the United States, we would just have paved the road a little bit wider for those bigger trucks.
So how did you deal with it? Did you have to get out of the way, or like what's the etiquette when you're on a Moroccan road and you're at you're having a standoff basically?
Well, I mean, I don't want to use the term, like Mexican standoff, but they weren't so narrow that you felt like you were going to die. But most of our driving, to be honest, was done off-road. The course that they had set up for us, we spent very little time on paved road. Partially because the speed limits are ridiculously low in Morocco. The highest speed limit I saw at one point was 80 kilometers. Most of the time we were restricted to 60.
Wow, so that's between like 32 and 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And was it enforced? Like,
yes.
Really?
So we would occasionally come up on random police checkpoints that were, that you slow down to 20 kph to drive through, and there's guys with rifles sitting there, making sure you don't violate the speed. And
wait. So these checkpoints with the rifles are just for speed?
From my understanding, they were. I mean, they probably were looking for other things, but we were told, one of the thing is a police checkpoint, for speed. Like, we were told to not speed. It was made very clear to us to not speed.
Sammy, have you ever had someone like point a rifle at you for speeding purposes?
No, not for speeding purposes. Not at all, actually.
The weirdest encounter I ever had with a gun on a press trip was in Germany, and it was maybe 2 years ago, and we were driving. It was a mix of new Cayennes and Boxsters, and I was in a Boxster with Vincent Aubé, a colleague of mine from Montreal, and we came to this, like, I don't know if I told this story on the podcast before, but we came to this tiny river, and I mean, like, you could have swam across this river in probably 3 or 4 minutes, but they had a ferry that was a cable operated ferry that would take cars across. I don't know why they didn't just build a bridge, but there you have it. And maybe some kind of traffic thing with traffic on the water, but we're waiting there for the ferry, and we drive on the ferry, and it's literally like a platform that goes back and forth. And halfway across, I noticed that the guy on the other side who's operating the ferry has a huge pistol strapped to his belt. And he doesn't have a uniform. He's not a police officer. He's just a dude in his, like, maybe early 50s operating a ferry with a very visible firearm. And I've never figured out what that was about.
I actually was wondering if any of the checkpoints, if they had any interest in this ginormous Nissan Titan, because I don't think it's not a common sight over there, is it?
No, it's not. So the locals were all actually really friendly, including most of the police that we did encounter if we had to talk to them. But really, they kind of left us all alone. We were told apparently it's fairly common because we were still in a touristy-ish part of the country. When you do sand dune adventures, when you buy those prepaid packages, like, you end up where we were, more or less.
Okay. Did you run into any tourists when you were there?
We did. Turns out at the hotel we were at the one night, I was talking to somebody who spent 5 years at cars.com, and, like, we have mutual mutual colleagues.
That's cool.
That is so weird. You went to Morocco,
right?
and you can't escape the internet.
Yeah, and I found somebody that lives in Chicago, works for cars.com. Like, we have the same editors on some stuff. Like,
wow. Did you guys argue about sports?
No, we did not. Staying away from that.
That's amazing.
But no, we were actually told, like, tourists and stuff will sometimes get shaken down for 20 euro from cops. But I think they realized how big of a group we were, and
plus you were strapped, right, Chad? I mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if we even had security there. I don't think we did, but we had a doctor, but that's about it. But yeah, it was just, I think they knew that we were a big group. I think they knew what we were doing there, and I think that it was more of like, all right, we're just gonna let them kind of do their thing. But all of the police are, like, dressed to the nines, like, they're full, like, what we would consider, like, dress blue uniforms here in the U.S., like, just as their normal, like, day-to-day patrol stuff. So it's really, I mean, it is a dictatorship, right? There's a king, there's a monarchy. Like, that's, I'm sorry, a monarchy, not a dictatorship.
I was like, wait a minute, is that really the term?
No, I'm sorry. That's my bad. But it's a monarchy. There's a king, there's a royal family. A lot of our phones didn't work properly when we got there because the week before we got there was daylight savings time, the changeover, and the Moroccan king decided, he's like, I don't want to do that anymore.
Oh, good for him.
Just didn't do it anymore. Which means Chad may have been an hour late to a briefing. Sorry, Wendy. But yeah, so it's the one really cool thing in the cities that I actually wish that we would do in the rest of the world is all of the traffic lights have timers on them, but they're not just red light timers or green light timers. It's both. So as soon as the light turns green, you see a countdown, 59, 58, 57. So, Audi's spending all this money on smart traffic light tech, and it's like, what if we just put a counter on the traffic light? Then you'll know when it turns green or when it turns red. And
True.
So it's like they've already got this problem licked in the third world. It's it's back in Germany or in the U.S. that we don't have the problem. But no, I mean, Titan's huge. Like, it's a big American V8, and it sounds awesome, right? Most of the vehicles, two of the vehicles we had there were V8s, the Patrol and then the Titan, and the other two were diesels. But it just, yeah, I mean, it kills, it kills the dunes and whatever. It's big and heavy, but a lot of the PR folks liked riding in it because there's actually legroom in the back. So when you have to spend the whole day, with journalists, like, it's more comfortable back there than it is in the back of any of the other vehicles. So.
Especially bumping around off road, I can imagine. Like, did you have any problems off road? I don't mean like, was it problematic, but like, what was it like driving in the dunes? You said a lot of the driving was off road. How did these things? How did the non-Titans deal with all that sand? And were there any specific challenges associated with that type of desert driving that maybe you hadn't run into before?
So we had run into, we used all sorts of different terrain types, including a water crossing, which definitely wasn't supposed to be a water crossing and wasn't a water crossing when they came through in their sighted tour. Okay. But they had a once in a 20-year rain, just days before we got there.
Wow.
So it actually rained on us when I was there. So for a part of the country, a part of the world that gets half an inch of rain a year, like, they pretty much got all of that and more a day or two before we got there. So I don't want to bring up a Toto song, but there's some blessing the rains that I think happened, or cursing them.
I thought you were going to bring up Rosanna.
No one brings up Rosanna. Okay, so now that we're
special, anything special? You asked about special, like off-road terrains. Sand is a pain in the butt because it's fun, it's challenging. When you get it right, it's very rewarding. But when you're going to climb over a dune, like, you have to pick a right speed. You have to be going fast enough to get to the top of the dune, but not so fast that you launch over the dune.
Did you launch over the dune? You can tell us.
Yeah. I did not. No. I have, just not on this particular trip. And then you also have to, like, if you start to feel like you're getting a little stuck, like, there's a point where you got to give it more power, but then you have to know when to stop giving it power, because all you're doing is burying yourself into the sand.
Yeah.
So it can be quite a challenge. A couple of the V8s had perhaps a minor issue that we're waiting to hear back from engineering about. So I don't want to go into a lot of detail just because I don't have specifics. But they didn't necessarily like having power consistently in the sand. I didn't have an issue, but there was at least one patrol that maybe had a little bit harder over time. But then the diesels, like the Terra and the Navarra, they're super light, especially compared to Titan.
Yeah.
So the Navarra.
Anything on this planet, like a battleship, is lighter than a Titan.
The Navarra is just it was on the dunes. It was great. It was fantastic because it would hardly ever get into the sand. It was just it's a billy goat, I think is what we started calling it. Cool. Any terrain you kind of just throw at it, it just handles it. And
I love that.
That was Sammy's nickname when he first started growing a beard as a teenager.
Right. I wanted to talk a little bit. These weren't like special trim levels. They weren't like if Toyota was doing this, these would all be like TRD Pros or TRD Off-Roads or TRD Super Duper, whatever they call those trim levels.
So the Patrol and the Terra are just normal trim, whatever their top. I mean, they were both top trims of those vehicles. The Titan was the Pro 4X.
Right. Okay. So it's got a little bit more ground clearance, right?
Right. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's a TRD Pro competitor, but it's more than just the regular Titan. But the Pro 4X has the locking rear diff. So I think that's part of that. With that, the Patrol had the locking rear end, and then so did the Terra, because the Terra is built on the Navarra platform, so it's got all of the Navarra underpinnings, and then the only one that was like special was the Navarra. The Navarra was the N Guard trim, which was their higher level trim, with the Arctic trucks, the AT32 pack. So it adds a little bit of ground clearance, much more off-road focused tires, a front locker along with the rear locker, and some of the trucks even had waterproof snorkels. Wow. So like legit water snorkels, not what ZR2 has on the Bison, or not the new TRD Pro.
Oh, trash talking the Bison.
They're not water snorkels. They're desert air intakes, and while those are useful, because if you're driving through a lot of dust and dirt, like, you don't want to in your air intake, so the higher you can get the clean air from, the better. But you can't ford. It doesn't improve the water fording of that vehicle.
It's not sealed. It's like if you tried to use your smartphone in the shower versus when outside in the rain, right? Like it's not gonna you'll get away with it in the rain, but as soon as you get the water up to the level of that air intake, you're gonna start taking in water.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was probably the most off-road focused of the group. There were other regular Navarras there. Our support crew and the people leading our convoys were in just regular Navarra trims. No special outfits, and they were doing all the same stuff that we were doing in the Arctic truck. So I don't think that I don't think the Arctic trucks version added anything other than a cool factor.
Yeah.
To what we were doing, but a lot of the sand driving was pretty intense.
Okay.
But
did you run into any giant scorpions? Like, is that a thing? Like, I'm talking like scorpions the size of a Navarra.
So here's the thing about scorpions.
Scorpion King.
The smaller. So actually, speaking of the Mummy, one of the places we went is called, I believe it was like Mummy Hill or Mummy Mountain, and it's actually where they filmed the Mummy.
I thought is that where Brendan Fraser was born?
Yeah,
it may have been. Yeah,
Mummy Hill, Canada.
But no, so they legit filmed the movie there. But I digress. The scorpions. The thing about scorpions is the smaller ones are the more dangerous ones. So like if you're in Arizona, the little clear ones that you can hardly see. If those sting you, you're not going to have a good morning.
I thought the most dangerous scorpions were the ones with an education.
Anyway.
Okay, Chad. We gotta change subjects from the Titan into. I want to talk about the patrol. No, the patrol. See, I love
Scorpion Patrol.
I'm big.
Yeah. Let's. I want to hear the Scorpion story.
This is not the unnamed Scorpion podcast.
No. Sammy. We'll get to the non-Scorpion content, but just give Chad 30 seconds to talk about the giant Scorpion.
Anyways, I don't know if you know Kevin from the Trucks team, but he definitely stepped on a scorpion in his room.
Wow.
And then it scurried away, so I'm surprised it didn't sting him. But then he saw it before he killed it. He took a picture, and it was the biggest scorpion I've ever seen.
Wow!
Like if I would have seen that picture, and if it was not the morning that we were leaving, I don't think I would have been able to sleep at night.
Well, you every time you visit Morocco, statistically, you eat 6 scorpions in your sleep.
Right.
Like I think that's how it is.
Well, because they got to stay warm. So they climb into your shoes and stuff to stay warm.
And inside your mouth.
Right. Exactly. So that's, especially if you're a snorer or if you have some sort of like COPD or whatever, like you're in trouble.
Yep. Definitely.
All right. Other vehicles.
Yeah. Talk to me about this patrol because I love the patrol like a ton. It's one of my favorite cars. Trucks, and I see it all the time when I go to the Middle East, and I've also seen like really badass Nismo versions of this patrol, and the patrol has a lot in common with the Armada, which is what we get in North America, but the model we get is lacking all of the wicked substance that the model you probably drove has.
Yeah. So the one we get here is watered down. There's
extremely watered down.
Yeah, I think the suspension's different. We don't get the locking rear end. The patrol that we had, it had Dubai license plates on it. All of the script on like the mirrors and stuff was written in Arabic. Like it came from the Middle East market when it was shipped here. It's awesome, right? Like it's all of the luxury.
Unstoppable. It's like one of the coolest things.
It's all of the
Nissan
luxury.
made.
It's all of the luxury of like our Armada, like our Platinum Reserve Armada, except you can point it at any kind of a hill and it'll just climb it.
So the Armada, as I understand, has both locking and front and rear locking differentials. It has sway bar disconnects, and it has a hydraulic body motion control suspension system. And we don't get any of that. And that's probably what helps this vehicle feel so. I would imagine. Is it confident on the sand? Is it confident in the off-roading situations? It's got to be one of the decent models up there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's still heavy.
All that technology.
Yeah, it has a big V8 in it. Mm-hmm. When it comes to all the off-road tech and toys, like there's just basically a rotary knob in there that you select like, hey, I want auto or I want 4 high or I want 4 low. So maybe it doesn't give you as much granular control over what systems you're using and what systems you're not. But I mean, we didn't have any issue. I mean, we technically didn't have any issues with it. It just did, and it's comfortable. And what's cool about it and the suspension that he uses is not on the sand, but just on like the really kind of just dirt and gravel and the other parts of the desert that's not sand. You could pick a speed right around like 40 kilometers and just maintain that speed, and it would just fly across the bumps.
Amazing.
So like, it would just be this nice, smooth, sort of experience where, yeah, you can tell the car is doing something because the suspension's working, but it's one of those. It's like the sweet spot speed for off-roading, and it's it's super comfortable. It's got like quad zone climate control, and it doesn't have massaging seats, but it has pretty much everything else. So the navigation thought we were in the Persian Gulf, but
Okay.
Wow.
That's whatever. Actually, the Titan was the only truck that knew what continent we were on. Yeah.
I think that's like how the plot for Top Gun 2 is going to start, where they're like the navigation system puts them in international waters where they think they're in international waters, but really they're not. And then Maverick has to come out of retirement from being an instructor to save the day.
You got to stop posting all these spoilers for Top Gun 2, okay?
They're more like conspiracy theories than spoilers, I think.
All right.
Okay,
my favorite. So my favorite was the Navarra. If I haven't made that clear,
the Navarra is another wicked vehicle, and it has a pretty significant place in the global market. It's not just a Nissan Navarra. It's a Renault. What's this car called? The Renault. It's called the Renault Everett. No, Alaskan. Renault Alaskan.
Wait, there's two Alaskans because there's that Chevy Alaskan plow truck too.
Hold on, let me double check. Yeah, Alaskan. Renault Alaskan. Wow. And it's also the Mercedes-Benz X-Class.
Yes.
And it's all based on the Navarra.
Yes.
So how good is the Navarra?
Brilliant. And so I just earlier, so the day before I went on this trip, I drove the CR2 Bison in Arizona.
That's
I don't know if I could tell you that the Bison was any better than the Navarra.
Again, with the Bison put down.
No, I enjoyed the Bison a lot, and I actually really do like that spool valve, the DSSV suspension from Multimatic. I think it really helps with the ride quality. But I don't think that anything. It doesn't have anything that the Navarra didn't. But what's interesting about Navarra is it's considered a premium truck in Europe. So like we look at the Frontier here as the bargain truck, the 19990 it starts at kind of a deal. That's Hilux and Ranger in Europe. So the Navarras that we were in were almost €50,000, and
wow, that's a lot of money to pay for a small truck.
Yeah.
Small asterisk, right? But.
Yeah, it's the biggest truck that you can buy there. It's those metric ton trucks, but. So it had what a lot of the European journalists viewed as luxury features, dual zone climate control and advanced sat nav, LED headlights, like all of these sorts of just a lot of features and stuff that we just don't have on the American Frontier. But I think the CR2 comparison is an apt one because I would argue that both trucks are just as capable. The ride quality benefits you get from the ZR2 suspension, you get a different way with the Navarra because it has that 5-coil rear suspension. So instead of the leaf springs, it's a coil suspension, so it rides nicer. Both have the underplate, skid plate protections and all of that stuff. I would say the Calibrado is a bit more modern in certain aspects, the navigation system and things like that. But you give me a hill, and I both are going to climb them pretty well. And if we had the Navarra here in the U.S., I think it would be an interesting argument to have because we're not getting a Ranger Raptor, right? So the most capable midsize truck right now is ZR2.
Well, and we've talked about this in the podcast before. Isn't the Ranger Raptor diesel only?
It is now, correct? Yes.
Okay.
So that's why we're not getting it.
Well, we're not getting it because the frames don't match up. So while it's the same platform, there are certain hard points that don't match up.
Okay.
So they can't physically build it. Wow. I don't know. I wrote about that back in March. Nobody apparently read it because people were just shocked. People were just shocked a couple of weeks ago. They're like, "Oh, we're not going to get Ranger Raptor." Yeah, not in this generation. It's impossible.
Okay, then let's get back to this Navarra. I've got a really stupid question to ask.
Yes.
There are no stupid questions,
No,
Sami.
This is really dumb.
Only stupid scorpions.
The Navarra and the Frontier are separate products. Should they be?
Hey now.
I mean,
No, but honestly, why do they have these two different vehicles? And from what I understand, the Navarra and your impression of the Navarra is positive, and I've heard very positive impressions of Navarra from other journalists as well. They like it a lot. Now, the Frontier is a different truck. It's a very what's the best word for it? Economical truck.
It is.
It's the elder statesman of its segment.
Yes.
But here's the thing, so Frontier was Navarra at one point. Just that the Navarra moved forward, and the
Frontier was left behind, and it's still being sold here.
So Frontier is kind of like a Navarra that kept its tail.
Yeah. but the reason, part of the reason is, look, we don't view Frontier as a premium truck offering here.
Okay.
It's a premium truck offering there, so they have more motivation to update the truck in Europe, because otherwise people aren't going to buy it. They're selling between 7,000 and 9,000 Frontiers a month in this country. Yes, there's huge incentive spend on it, whatever, but they've had the tooling paid for since George W. Bush was president.
Yeah,
so
it's just profit.
It's just all profit. So there's not a lot of motivation. I mean, a new one is coming, but there's not a lot of motivation to really do that when the buyers that are looking at that truck now are the ones that want the bargain truck. And honestly, if your argument is trucks are too expensive, trucks are too have too much advanced technology, or trucks are too big, the Frontier is the perfect truck for you.
Right.
It's true. Or you could, buy a Ranger from 2006 or something.
Sure, but we look through we look at the Ranger through rose-colored glasses, because the Ranger really wasn't that good.
I don't know. I mean, I like the one I owned one a couple of years ago, and I it was fine for my purposes. But if you really want a very basic truck, I mean, that's the definition of very basic truck.
Right,
the Frontier does a good job because it's a very cheap truck body with a very decent V6 engine.
It's also a lot bigger than the Ranger.
Right, and it also has a warranty, which if you're looking to buy at
the
sort of
newest
that entry
Ranger
level
you can find.
Right, no, if you're looking at the entry level of anything, odds are money matters, right? I mean, money matters to everybody. So, a new truck with a warranty compared to an older truck without one, I can see why people would want the warranty.
And then let's go from the Navarra and talk about this Terra. Now, I haven't heard much about the Terra, because I think it's a fairly new product.
It is.
I think it came out this year, right?
Yeah, it's brand new. I'm looking forward to the point where either Nissan kills it or changes the name on it so that I can call it the Nissan X Terra.
Right.
Zing!
Because I want to claim that, and I want to get that in publicly beforehand, that I'm writing that article that says X Terra on it. It's it's a Pathfinder. I mean, it really is fair to compare it, I think, to a Pathfinder, except it has
it's not a former Nissan Xterra.
No,
it's not a replacement for that. It's a replacement for the Pathfinder. So it's an Asian market, whatever. I don't know what it's replacing there, but okay. I'm using the Pathfinder reference to kind of give you an idea of what size and a vehicle we're sort of dealing with. So it's kind of big.
It's bigger.
Don't be modest, Chad. You can tell us how big it is.
I mean, I thought it was kind of small, but I'm used to big American SUVs. But it's a 3-row. I believe it was a 3-row, if I'm not mistaken, with a really cramped third row. It has because it's Asian market, it has the stadium seating in it, so the middle row sits higher up than the front. Mm-hmm. It's like you're at a movie theater or whatever.
Does that mean that people in the front 2 seats never stop talking?
Well, I mean, yeah, probably, right? So it's never going to go to Europe. It's never going to go to the United States. They're very clear on that.
That's another interesting decision. They've got product.
It feels really
any lineup. It does.
Yeah, but it's like where's it built, and how much does it cost to ship it?
Built in China,
right?
China and Thailand. There's 2 assembly plants there.
It feels
because
really
there's so many of these off-road, rugged-inspired trucks coming, or SUVs coming along. We've got the Blazer, we've got the new Bronco.
Whoa! Back up the Blazer there, my friend, because there is nothing rugged about that truck.
It's a rugged nameplate.
I want to say we're talking about why aren't they bringing the Terra? I think they might be trying to avoid what happened when they brought the EcoSport or EcoSport to North America, and everyone just panned it for being so far behind the standard for the segment.
But this is a 2018 vehicle. It's a brand new vehicle. The EcoSport was old when they decided to bring it over here. Like, it was insane.
The Terra, while it was extremely capable off-road, it felt kind of cheap. The NVH was not near as good as the other three vehicles there. It's definitely built for a price, and it's built for a particular target market, and I didn't really care for it that much.
And I don't like to spread rumors, but I've heard the Terra is haunted.
I mean, it might be. Rugged nameplates and everything like that. Part of this program was, I think, to show us, what globally they can do as a brand. And I think there's I think that we can get a lot from Navarra and putting that into the context of what the next frontier will be. But
what does that mean?
I mean,
the next frontier pickup, Sammy.
Yes,
not the final frontier.
What is it in the Navarra that you want to see in this upcoming frontier, or what the build quality or the design or what focuses do you see that they'll be going after here?
I would love to see a higher trim Navarra frontier, whatever, similar to what we drove, except with the layest tech. So the newest infotainment, the ProPilot Assist for the level 2 ADAS. I mean, they haven't quite said all that's coming, but I mean, it's obvious that that's going to be coming. I would like to see an off-road, a ZR2 kind of focused version, whether it's they can't use the name Arctic Trucks here because nobody knows what it is. But they do currently have a deal with Icon.
Oh wow!
And because you can buy a Frontier, you can buy a Titan right now with a 3-inch Icon lift from the factory, and it's all warranted and everything with your new truck. So they've already kind of got a relationship in place for that. I'd love to see kind of an Icon, slightly modified one for the top end.
Yeah, that's a fascinating partnership. Just even thinking about like what that means for Icon.
Yeah. So it'd be cool to see them exploit that. And I think Icon's a name that a lot of North Americans understand. At least people that would be interested in the off-road credentials of the truck.
Is that nameplate rugged enough for you, Sammy? Icon?
Yeah, it's getting there.
All right.
But then I would also like to see, I'm really curious on how big the new truck's going to get. Because this Frontier, this Navarra didn't feel much bigger than the current Frontier. I would have to look at the actual.
And do you like that? So do you think that size is right?
I think that's appealing.
Because its competitors, the Tacoma and the Colorado, are bigger. Yeah, they're bigger trucks.
I think that the problem is those mid-size trucks are now the size of full-size trucks of not too long ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think part of the appeal of a mid-size truck is to be able to park it in a garage. And if the truck becomes too big to park in a garage, then you lose sales. Because in a lot of ways, mid-size trucks don't make sense in the U.S. You can buy a full-size truck for not that much more money, or the same money, or depending on incentives, sometimes cheaper. So why is there a couple 100,000 people a year gravitating towards mid-size trucks?
Well, they are easier to park in a city if you live in an urban environment, and that's actually something. It's kind of a good segue for what I wanted to talk about next, because I spent a week with the F-150 diesel from Ford, and one of my primary complaints about that truck was I had a lot of trouble parking it. And I grew up, I have owned maybe 7 or 8 F-150s in my life, and maybe the first 4 or 5 vehicles I owned were F-150s, but they were from the 80s and the early 90s, and I was living in a city and I had never had any issues with them. And now all of a sudden, 20 years later, we're in a situation where the same segment is a real difficult thing to handle in an urban environment.
Which motor did you have in this F-150? Because the F-150 has
the diesel has a diesel engine.
Oh, my mistake. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I was expecting you to say Power Stroke, but I didn't hear that.
I'm not as much of a brand aware person as you are, Sammy. I know for you it's all about EcoDiesel, Power Stroke, Blazer, Terra, X Terra. Power Rangers, Voltron.
And what was the output of this diesel engine in the diesel?
So it's at 250 horsepower and 440 pound-feet of torque. And if you are keeping score at home, that is very, very close to the EcoDiesel from Ram, which is not currently available. But last year it was available, and it was 240 horsepower, so you're within 10, and then 420 pound-feet, and you're within 20. So it's very close. And if you look at the RPM, the Ford delivers both of those numbers a teensy bit lower.
How does it feel? Does it feel very, very stout, rugged? Does it feel tough? Or does
it kind of feels like the warm apple pie of diesel engines. It's not really something, you know how when you drive a heavy duty truck and has the diesel and you really feel like the clattering and you really feel like you have a lot going on under the hood. This half-ton diesel from Ford, it's a much stealthier experience. It's not nearly as in your face. The power is not amazing from a driving perspective. Like, you're not really leaping off the line. Yes, there's a lot of torque, but it's not the kind of torque that spins your tires. It's the kind of torque that is essentially.
It's not that kind of torque, people.
No, it keeps you smooth around town. It has 10-speed automatic transmission, like pretty much every F-150 these days. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very smooth vehicle to drive. But there's one thing that's weird about this, and I think Chad can speak to this because I know he's driven this vehicle too, is if you look at the tow rating of the diesel from Ford, it's actually not the best tow rating in the F-150 lineup.
That's interesting.
So I think part of that comes to just the amount of engines you can choose from. I will second that that the diesel is really quiet in the F-150. I mean, you can barely tell it's there. The diesel engine the half-ton diesel is really sort of it's a combination play. It's supposed to get you a little bit better fuel economy while also not losing as much fuel economy when you tow. So if you're somebody that tows a lot but maybe doesn't need a heavy duty truck, that's sort of what.
Then you get a Titan XD, don't you?
Well, some people do, sure. But sales figures are a majority go for a half-ton diesel like the F-150 or the Ram when they still offered it, which they barely offered it last year either because the EPA had a major problem with them. So.
Yeah, I think if you want to max out the 11,400 pound tow rating on the diesel, you have to get the two-wheel drive regular cab XL. That's the version.
About minimizing weight, right?
Yeah. Well, the gross vehicle weight rating, right? Like that's the big thing. So it's not like with a heavy duty truck where you're picking the diesel to tow. It's like Chad said, it's a more nuanced kind of approach to the market. But fuel economy is something that Ford has really been pushing because they say they're getting 30 miles per gallon on the highway. That's the advertised. That's the advertised rating.
Sounds promising.
And it's around 22 to 25 around town, I believe.
What kind of town?
Oh, sorry, it's 20. It's 20 to 22 around town.
Like whose town?
Like a town like your town or what?
Our town. Okay. It's like our town. But I drove it I did not do a lot of highway in it. I had a pretty decent mix, probably like 30%, 35% highway. The rest was.
We can expect 20 to 22.
Yeah, so I ended up with about 140, 150 miles on the truck. I got 15 miles per gallon. And that's
not good.
That's not great. It's cold. I mean, it wasn't as cold as it is now here in Montreal, but it was definitely hovering around the freezing mark, and that's not going to be good for any vehicle, let alone a diesel. Okay. But I was really surprised because in the past with the Ram's EcoDiesel, I got very good fuel economy. In all forms of driving, and I was kind of expecting that from Ford. And this, we were talking before the podcast. My father has a 2012, I think it's a 2012 F-150 with a 5-liter V8, and he gets 15 miles per gallon towing a race car on a trailer.
Oh my god!
So it just seemed like expectation and reality were really different for me with this diesel. Chad, did you have the chance to do any fuel economy testing when you had the truck in your care?
So, the only time that I've driven it, honestly, was on the launch.
Okay.
And I got sort of what I expected, which was in the low 20s.
Okay.
But we were in Denver, and we were doing a lot of mountain stuff. So, you'd get like 10 miles per gallon up the hill, but then you'd get 30 or 40 down the hill, and it all averaged out to around 20. the funny thing you were talking about, how do you get those max tow ratings and max fuel economy and everything? A lot of times those both fuel economy and towing are tested with the rear wheel drive, the 2-wheel drive regular cabs for the
yeah, and I was in a crew cab platinum 4-wheel drive.
So it will. You can there may be individual ratings for it on like the fuel economy website, but a lot of times when you see like a best in class number, or you hear somebody say, "Well, our truck can tow 34,500 pounds," like that's a very specific model that will do that.
For sure, it's the same with compact cars as well. There's sometimes even a model that's just built for fuel economy, and it's a total stripper, and you'll never find it on the lot. I'm actually going to take a look right now at fuel economy, fueleconomy.gov, which is has the listing for this pickup, and I will see if they have a special version of what my version of the truck was supposed to be rated at. But I would be very surprised if the combined rating would be 15.
No, it's not. No, that number is low. That number is low.
And I don't think I really have a lead foot because it's I wasn't driving for excitement. Like it's not really what I was trying to do with the diesel. I was just doing my daily type of driving. I didn't really haul anything in it either. I mean, I even took a break from hauling tires because Sami says I've become a cliche.
Which is weird because of all times to be carrying tires, it's now when the snow hits and you've got all this winter tires to get to and from your vehicles.
Yeah, but my vehicles are I don't currently have a winter vehicle, and I just put away both of my summer vehicles, so they're hibernating for the winter. So I'm in between right now, and I have not had to move any tires.
Oh my goodness. Okay,
I know, but it's a weird feeling.
It is. That is weird. I want to bring up this fuel economy discrepancy because about a month ago I compared the new Ram 1500 to a EcoBoost F-150, 3.5 liter EcoBoost, and I mean the EcoBoost is rated to get significantly better fuel economy than the Ram, but we never saw that in practice. And after publishing the story and mentioning the fuel economy numbers, a number of readers and our audience were quick to point out that there's almost no way to get the described fuel economy numbers on EcoBoost engines. So it seems like this trend is continuing. There's some sort of secret code that you've got.
I'd argue that there's not no way. But so how much
like would it an average driver
even with a 10-speed automatic, eh?
But with the people that are rating in, I would suggest that maybe like you don't know how they're driving, and the thing with turbocharged engines, and what you both understand, and I'm sure a lot of these listeners understand as well, is when you're on boost you lose fuel economy, right? Mm-hmm. But also boost is fun, so if you start to get used to the torque of the torque or power of kind of putting your foot in it a little bit more than what you normally do, your fuel economy does suffer. Now I've driven a 2.7 when the 2.7 first came out, so that would have been still with I think the 6-speed auto, and I was able to get right around 23, 24 for the week, but that was work. Like you had to really make sure you're not really putting your foot into it, and I think the way people normally drive, I think they use more boost than they think they are, and I think that's where the number starts to drop off some. I forgot how to talk apparently when I was in Morocco, but it's
a scorpion venom, man. It's getting to you, and it's a slow burn.
Yeah. It is. Where you'll see the big drop in fuel economy is once you put a load in the back of the truck or hook it up to a trailer, and then it just drops off the face of the earth. So.
The other thing about approaching the F-150 diesel from a fuel economy perspective is that it's not inexpensive to get this engine. It's about $4,000 if you want to go from if you're in a Lariat trim, which comes with the 2.7 EcoBoost V6. I think that's the lowest trim where you can add the Power Stroke, and it's about $4,000 for that. And if you want to swap out, if you want to go from the 5 liter to the diesel, it's $3,000.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so the where this becomes more of an issue, I want to break this down a little further, but you can get an EcoBoost V6, the 3.5 version, for $600 on top of the 5 liter. So your choice is, I want to get $3,000 for the diesel or $600 for the 3.5 liter EcoBoost. And even on the Lariat, it costs less than half as much to get the 3.5 versus the diesel. And if you
go ahead, I'm sorry. I was gonna interrupt, but go ahead.
Well, it comes down to how much fuel savings do you have to get to make up that $4,000 gap? Because we've established it's not necessarily going to tow better. All these trucks are going to tow fine, and it's mostly a fuel economy play. So the value part of the equation, I think, is kind of questionable.
The diesel only makes sense. This is the Chad's professional opinion. That diesel engine only makes sense if you are towing regularly.
You think it would have that much of an impact? And how much towing regularly? Like you think like every weekend, or?
I would say probably every weekend, if not more often than that.
Wow.
So if you're towing a boat or something, because honestly, like that 3.5
day.
Yeah, that 3.5 liter EcoBoost, like you hook a trailer up to it, and that 25 miles to the or 20 miles to the gallon that you're getting becomes 8 or 7. You don't see that kind of drop off with the diesel. That's the reason why diesels are popular in the bigger heavy duty trucks too. Not just because of the torque and things like that, but because the fuel economy sort of stays consistent. But you do have to drive a lot to make up $4,000. I mean,
and maybe the flip side to that too is if you have a very long commute and you absolutely have to do that commute in a full size pickup. Then maybe the diesel would make sense. Like if you have a 100-mile commute every day and it's highway and you're like, I need to have a truck for reasons, and you end up with the diesel, you might be able to eke out that fuel economy difference and make back some of the money, or maybe break even on it, But that's a very specific situation, and one where you should probably have a car anyway. I mean, we're in a world where like 40 miles per gallon is the new 20 miles per gallon in a lot of ways. So if you're choosing a truck, it's usually because you need the truck. And I think in this case, in that specific commuting case, you'd really have to ask yourself, do you need the truck?
Well, it also, I mean, if you're doing even that kind of commuting, I would argue the 2.7, for the price savings that you get, you'll get close enough fuel economy that you won't make up the $3,000. Like it is a towing fuel economy engine is really what it is. And it'll be interesting to see what Silverado, we know what GM does with their 3-liter diesel that's coming next year. But because I think with Ram. And I was just talking about this recently with some folks at Chevrolet, that I think the reason why the EcoDiesel kind of became popular was because when it first came out, there were 3 engine options. There was that Pentastar V6, there was the Hemi V8, and then there was the diesel. And the diesel delivered so much better fuel economy over that V8, and it still made a good amount of torque. It felt like a really good truck engine.
Yeah, it did.
It towed well enough, and it just... It felt like of those 3 engines, like that's the one I would have bought, even if it was priced a little bit higher. With Ford and with Chevy right now, they have 6 or 7 engines to choose from, so you can really fine tune your truck owning experience.
That sounds like too many engines. Am I?
What are you, the engine police?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It sounds like a lot to choose from.
Half-ton truck buyers like that choice. I don't know why, but they do, because there's no if you had any car that offered you 6 different engines, like we would be laughing at the company. Be like, that's too many. Like people don't want that choice. They want to go in and pick the color they want and a certain option package, and then you have OEMs tell us that it's too expensive to offer all of these different options. We bundle these things together and whatever, but for some reason in half-ton trucks,
you can get away with it.
The more the better. And
and also don't forget that a lot of these engine choices, you get shepherded into them like by the trim level or the size of the body, the size of the box or the bed, and the body style, the number of doors, all this stuff like feeds into what you can actually come home with.
Right.
Because like the diesel, you can't get it in an XL or an XLT unless you're a fleet customer.
Correct.
That's just how it is. The version of the truck I drove was the Limited, which is the second from the top if you don't include the it actually is positioned.
You drove the Platinum.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. I drove the Platinum, which is second from the top under the Limited. It's just over the Raptor. Right. And it was comfortable. I'll be honest though, it doesn't feel like a luxury truck. It starts at $54,000 for the base model, and then you add, I guess, another $3,000 or $4,000 for the diesel. So you're starting to look at a $65,000 truck before options.
The new Limited, which is a 1 engine only offering, which is the Raptor engine,
Yeah.
They also upgraded the interior. A lot of the materials feel better, feel nicer. It feels more like the interior of a really expensive Ram, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely, because I mean, in my mind, Ram is the segment leader for interiors.
I don't know
for full-size trucks.
I don't know if they're quite there, but the new Limited is a lot closer than Ford has ever been. So
yeah, it's like it's very hard to see the difference between a Flex, a Lariat, and a Platinum. I mean, the Platinum, just I'm sure incrementally you can point out the changes like the wood trim and stuff like that,
right.
but it doesn't blow you away. And it really should blow you away when you're paying that much more money, because it starts to become a question between the Lariat and the Platinum. You're looking at least 10 grand.
Right. And honestly, like the sweet spot for me in F-150 right now, if I were buying a non-Raptor, is a XLT, or not, sorry, an XLT, but a Lariat. Pick your cab size, it doesn't matter. Lariat 4x4 with the 2.7 and get like the adaptive cruise control and stuff like that. And you pretty much have everything you want, and you're right around 50, 55.
Which is still so much money to pay for a truck. I mean, it's like in my mind, I'm like, wow.
It is a lot of money, but it's sort of like that. Like, get everything you want without, spending a stupid amount of money. And not that 50 isn't a stupid amount of money, but 50 is a stupid amount of money.
Actually, I want you to help me out with one more thing, Chad. And yes. I'm not sure I don't think we talked about this before we started the podcast, but I actually saw that you published some stories on the new 4-cylinder turbocharged Silverado.
You could say Sierra too, because it's getting that engine as well.
It's getting that engine as well. Well, let's say Silverado because that's what you drove.
And that's what I drove.
This is a very interesting. This is the first time a truck this size has gotten an engine that, well, with 4 cylinders, right?
Correct. Yeah. So
what is the deal here? What happened?
What's the deal with the 4-cylinder?
Exactly.
So in all of Chevrolet's volume trims, so I think that's custom, I think that's RST, and then LT. I don't remember all the trims, but I'm pretty sure in those 3, the base engine is no longer a 4.6 liter V6, but it is a 2.7 liter 4-cylinder, not to be confused with the 2.7 liter 6-cylinder in the Ford. So as long as you don't think about that, this basically new base volume engine, I don't have the specs in front of me because you didn't say you were going to ask.
I've got them. What do you need? I've got 310 horsepower, 310 horsepower, 349 pound-feet of torque.
Which is a lot. Honestly, it's a lot for anything.
Why can't we get this engine in the Cruise? Just putting that out there.
I want it in the. Actually, I want it in the Colorado. But
yeah, sure.
I think that makes a good place for that. It's actually really good. It uses something called, and I didn't want to get too technical in the Auto Guide article just because.
Because you know their audience.
Well,
I would have cut it anyways.
I didn't want Jody's eyes to glaze over when she started reading about nerdy truck stuff. But it uses a dual volute turbocharger from Borg Warner, which basically volute, but it's a dual volute that basically controls how the air that goes into the turbocharger is more disrupted. It's very just out of control air. It's crazy air. As it goes into the turbocharger, which helps it spool up faster. So turbo lag is almost non-existent. I would say that you can't tell, but I'm sure somebody out there will be like, oh no, I can tell there's turbo lag. When they initially had journalists drive this engine back in the summer, I was with that group for an article that went on pickuptrucks.com, and they didn't tell us what we were driving. They just said, go drive it. And then they came back and asked us what it was, and nobody knew it was a turbocharged 4-cylinder. So I think.
And then one of them pointed at you and said 7 days, and then walked away, right?
Correct. Yes.
Wow, that's creepy. That is
really
creepy.
That stuff happens to me all the time. It's really weird.
Is this better than a 3.3 liter base V6? Yes.
Yeah. So it's better than Ford's base V6 for sure.
I like the 4.3 from GM though. It's a good engine.
It is.
It is. I like this one a little bit better. I think I think it's a good. I mean, I think it's a good base engine, and sort of the point that I was trying to drive home with my very jet lagged writing for AutoGuide was in the F-150. The price delta between the 3.3 liter and the 2.7 V6 EcoBoost is $995.
Okay.
It's a no-brainer. You check that box every single time because that 2.7 liter is a peach of an engine, and it's so much nicer than the base 3.3. And for the price difference, I mean, it's gonna reward you every day in drivability and better towing.
Yeah.
Fuel economy is not gonna be worse. Like it's the box you have to check.
Plus, Sami could eat a peach all day.
Sure. And,
no face-off references.
Oh, and anyways, continuing in the Silverado, most of the people are going to spend again $1,000 to go to the 5.3 liter V8. That will remain their volume engine. That's their prediction. But I don't feel like you need to check that box. Like if you want a V8, check it. It's $1,000. Who cares? But I think you could buy the 4-cylinder and be happy with it every single day as a truck engine.
That's.
I'd love to know what it's like to be happy. I might just buy this truck just for that reason.
All right, let's wrap it up this week. All trucks, all the time on the Unnamed Truck Podcast.
And Scorpions.
Hey.
And Scorpions.
Oh, yeah, Scorpions.
Hey, I know that we're probably running long, but did you want to address the other commercial vehicles that we were going to talk about?
No, I think we're gonna save that for another time. I think. I know there could only be so much commercial fun.
Right. Actually, what we're going to address a listener question. We'll do that next week. I just want to make sure that what was the name of the fellow who emailed us?
It was Corey.
Corey,
Excellent.
we got your email about all of
Corey.
the commercial vehicles. We are definitely going to do our research and tell you what we have to say about these things.
Hey, Corey, just buy a Transit, and then you'll be happy.
No way, man. The Sprinter.
Way to spoil the question for everyone who's not Corey.
Well,
he's the only one who knows what the question was.
Now he has his answer.
Okay. If you enjoyed this week's podcast, and I hope you did, especially because Chad was on this week's podcast, you can listen to more of our podcasts over at unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. You can see all of our latest episodes. You can actually subscribe to our podcast using a variety of buttons on the top part of the website there. So if you use iTunes or Google Play Music or Google Podcasts or Shoutcast or Spotify, and what else is there? Pocket
Well,
Cast.
you can find and if you're in your app, any of those apps, we are in there. We're everywhere. We are ubiquitous. If you want to do a deep dive into our archives and find out what it was like when we were just getting to know each other on the podcast, and see how tender those moments were, you could do that too.
When we were poking and prodding our way through the podcast, the whole podcast medium.
Just trying to figure out who we were and where we fit into the world.
How is that different than now?
It's a little less abrasive, I think. A little bit more love. If you want to get in touch with us, the easiest way to do that for me is on Instagram. I'm at Hunting Benjamin, or you can use email the old-fashioned way, which I guess is the digital equivalent of a smoke signal, benjamin@benjaminhunting.com. If you want to get a hold of Sami, he loves the cesspool that is Twitter. You can reach him there at Sami_ha, like you're laughing. Chad, if people want to get a hold of you and harangue you for not bringing a Scorpion home from Morocco, how could they do that?
I don't know if Customs would have let me, but Twitter is a really good place, actually. I mean, it is a cesspool of evil, but it's a fun cesspool of evil. And that would just be my name, which is at Chad Kirchner, ChadKirchner. And
Chad, how do you know you didn't bring a Scorpion home in your clothing?
That's true. Actually,
you have to move now. You might have to move.
I'm gonna have to nuke my whole house from orbit.
It's the only way to be sure.
It is. It is.
Next week, Sami, what are we going to be talking about?
We have to talk about the new Mercedes GLE class because it has this wild new suspension setup that I can't wait to describe to you.
Wow, that's okay. And I'm going to be talking about the Kia Stinger, but not the Kia Stinger GT. I'm going to be talking about the turbocharged 4-cylinder version of the car, which is I've driven in the past, but this is the first week I've spent with it, the first substantial amount of time I've had with it. So I've got a lot to say about this car.
Very cool.
And I'm going to be talking about, probably not on this podcast, but the Jeep pickup. Woo!
Oh, the Gladiator. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Are you driving that soon?
No, I don't know. But I know that the news is coming for the LA Auto Show because that's next week. So
All right. Well, the mystery correspondent Chad Kirchner will be all over the Gladiator. So thanks again for listening, everybody. And until next week, have a great one.
Take care.